My name is Paige Mercer and I'm 31 years old. 19 years ago, my parents pulled out of a gas station 80 miles from home and left me standing under the fluorescent lights because I was 12 and I had told the truth in public. I slept behind the dumpster that night, wrapped in my brother's baseball hoodie, counting headlights and hoping one pair would turn around. None did. I never spoke to my parents again. No calls, no holidays, not so much as a postcard for 19 years. Then, this past August, an ivory envelope showed up at my apartment in Columbus. Inside was my brother's wedding invitation, and a handwritten note from my parents, a single line that made my hands shake at my own kitchen table. But here's what none of them knew when they mailed that envelope: what I would learn in the week before the wedding, and what I would do when my father raised his glass in front of 200 guests. My family still hasn't recovered from it. If stories about standing up without shouting are your kind of stories, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Now, let me take you back to where it started. The Tuesday it arrived, I had just finished 11 hours in the pediatric emergency room at St. Ambrose Children's Hospital. My last patient was an 8-year-old named Ruby with a green stick fracture in her left arm. She held still for the x-ray like a soldier. Then she looked up at me and asked the question I hear more often than any adult would believe. Will my mom be mad at me? I crouched down to her level, the way I always do. No, sweetheart. Getting hurt is not a crime. She studied me to see if I meant it. I meant it. I have spent 9 years saying that sentence to other people's children, and every single time, some small part of me is saying it to a girl the same age, standing in a parking lot off Route 30. I drove home, dropped my badge in the bowl by the door, and smelled onions and butter. Daniel was at the stove, sleeves pushed up, grading papers between stirs. He teaches high school history and cooks like a man apologizing to vegetables. He nodded at the counter. Mail's there. Something fancy came for you. The envelope sat on top of the electric bill like it owned the place. Heavy ivory paper. My name in looping calligraphy, the kind people pay for. And in the corner, a postmark I hadn't seen in 6 months, since the last of Nana's estate papers cleared. Barlow Falls, Ohio. I stood at my own counter, in my own kitchen, in the life I built from nothing, and I held that envelope the way you hold something that might go off. Daniel turned down the burner. Paige? Who's it from? I knew before I opened it. Some part of me had been waiting 19 years for it. The invitation itself was beautiful, I'll give them that. Thick cream card, apple blossom border, engraved lettering. Caleb Mercer and Madison Whitmore request the honor of your presence. Saturday, October 17th. First Methodist Church, Barlow Falls, Ohio. Reception to follow at Whitmore Orchard. My brother was getting married, and some string inside me I thought I'd cut pulled tight anyway. Caleb, 35 now. The boy who once threw a hoodie out a truck window was marrying into the biggest family in the county. I turned the card over, and that's when it slid out. A scrap of lined notebook paper, folded in quarters, tucked behind the RSVP card like a stowaway. I unfolded it. My mother's slanted cursive, the same hand that used to sign my permission slips. All is forgiven, Paige. Come home. Mom and Dad. I laughed. One short, ugly laugh, the kind that comes out before you can vote on it. Then my hands started shaking and would not stop. Daniel read it over my shoulder and I watched him do the math on my face. All is forgiven, he said slowly. Forgiven? Paige, what do they think they're forgiving you for? That is the question, isn't it? 19 years of silence, and the message my parents chose to send me was a pardon. Not an apology. Not a question. A pardon, handed down from the people who left a 7th grader at a gas station and drove 80 miles home to sleep in their own beds. I put the note on the counter and smoothed it flat, and I heard my own voice come out level and strange. To explain that, I told him, I have to start at the beginning. So, that's what I'll do for you now. Let me tell you about Barlow Falls. Barlow Falls is the kind of Ohio town where the church bulletin is the newspaper, and the newspaper is the church bulletin. Everybody knows everybody's business, which is exactly why everybody works so hard to make sure there's nothing to know. We lived on Maple Street, in a white house with green shutters and the prettiest porch on the block. My father, Ray Mercer, worked the line at Harding Steel and spent his weekends under other people's trucks, saving for a repair shop of his own someday. He was a deacon at First Methodist. Men shook his hand slow, with respect. My mother, Brenda, ran the church women's circle and could stretch a casserole like a magician. My brother Caleb was 16, and he was the town's whole heart that year. A pitcher with a fastball that made grown men in seed caps talk like poets. And then, there was me. 12 years old, glasses, library card worn soft at the corners. The one who asked questions. Why does Pastor Jim get a new car when the offering plate is for the poor? Why does Mrs. Kepler smile at Mom on Sunday and talk about her at the beauty shop on Tuesday? My mother had one answer for all of it, delivered at the dinner table with a look that could press a shirt. We don't tell family business. That was the first commandment on Maple Street. Not the lying, the telling. You could be broke, you could be furious, you could be crumbling like a dirt road in March, and all of it was fine, as long as the porch stayed painted. Our house was the best-looking house on the street. It was also the quietest. It took me years to understand those two facts were related. The spring I was 12, Harding Steel cut a third of its floor, and my father's name was on the list. I know now that it broke something in him. Back then, all I knew was what I saw. He still got up at 5. He still put on his coveralls, still packed a lunch pail, still backed out of the driveway at the same time every morning. Where he went all day, I couldn't tell you. My mother's mouth got thinner. The phone got answered on the first ring, like she was racing somebody to it. And late one night, I came downstairs for water and stopped on the third step, because my parents were at the kitchen table with a shoebox of envelopes, and my father's voice was a kind of quiet I'd never heard. The truck payment was 2 months behind. The new Silverado, the one he'd bought the month before the layoff, glossy red, parked out front like a trophy. The bank had called twice. My mother said the words consolidate, and Pastor Jim. And my father brought his hand down on the table so hard the sugar bowl jumped. Sunday morning, we sat in the third pew like always. My father put the tithe envelope in the plate with a motion smooth as a card trick, and I watched my mother laugh at something Mrs. Kepler said, bright and easy, like a woman without a shoebox. In the car, I asked her, honestly asking, why it was okay to pretend at church when church was where you learned not to pretend. She looked at me in the mirror for a long second. That's not pretending. That's privacy. 3 weeks later, the truth fell out of my mouth in a bleacher full of strangers, and it cost me my whole childhood.